Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 14th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Joe Biden approval rating that has now dipped below 50%, and dipped below an actual majority, actually, which would be 50.1%. Regardless, Joe Biden's honeymoon period seems to be over. The disapprove and approve are going to cross paths at some point in the immediate future. And this is unfortunate for Democrats across the country, as Joe Biden has been the president that has been approved of despite this country being so polarized for such a long period of time. And it makes sense. You see, what's happening here with Joe Biden is that this is the end of an era in which the president is approved of straight off from the inauguration. It always happens for presidents. For Donald Trump, it lasted 2 weeks. For Barack Obama, it lasted 7-8 months. And Joe Biden is going on to a similar pathway of being approved of by a similar time period by the American public. But now, this is monumental news, because not once during the entirety of Joe Biden's presidency has he dipped below 50.1%. Today, he's at 49.9% amongst polls of likely or registered voters, and then amongst regular adults, which Democrats actually seem to do a bit better in than normal, is 49.8%. When you go into all polls, it shows 50%. I'm not entirely sure why, because it just averages the likely or registered voters and the polls of adults, but for whatever reason, it shows 50%. But even then, that is not a majority. That is half of the country that approves of Joe Biden, which, don't get me wrong, these numbers aren't super bad for Joe Biden, but they were much, much better. When I did these approval rating updates for 2 weeks at a time, you would see that the approval rating was up plus 10. For Joe Biden. At the beginning of his presidency, he saw a high point of being approved of by nearly 20 points, according to FiveThirtyEight, and 20 points, according to Real Clear Politics. But as you can see, you can start to see that over the months, over this time frame, that Joe Biden ended up in the negative. Well, not necessarily the negative, ended up declining heavily from the beginning of his presidency. And you can see it here on Real Clear Politics when it came down to a number of issues. See, the reason why Joe Biden's approval rating is dipping is because the way that the public receives him on every single issue is also dipping. The first thing that was really monumental for Joe Biden holding up his approval rating by the largest amounts was the handling of the coronavirus. You can see here, straight from the first week of his presidency, that 38% more Americans believed that Joe Biden was doing good with handling the virus than didn't. 40% more. 25-point margin, 32-point margin, a low point of 19, 18, then back up to 36, 26, 28. The average was that Joe Biden was doing well when it came down to handling of the coronavirus. And that is still very much the public sentiment, but not nearly as much as it once was before. If you watched my video where I covered this, you would have remembered that the handling of the coronavirus 1 week ago, the average was plus 32. Today, that has been cut in half. Reason being, the Delta variant, lack of vaccinations. The American public is turning on the person in the highest office, even if what might be happening isn't their direct fault of Joe Biden. The same way the American public blamed Donald Trump when it came to handling of the coronavirus, even if he wasn't the reason why the virus began in the first place. The American public is very quick to blame those up in office, and that was detrimental to Donald Trump and will be detrimental to Democrats if they do not recover by 2021 November, which even then they might be able to just narrowly hold on to in Virginia, but then especially in the midterms, they cannot afford to have these lackluster numbers. But the unfortunate reality is that they'll probably be a lot worse than where they stand today. Moving on to the issue of immigration. The media has been hitting hard with Joe Biden in terms of handling of immigration. For the first few months, Joe Biden was doing fine. There were occasional polls that showed him in the negative, but pretty much throughout, beginning months of January, February, and then early March, you would see here that Joe Biden was approved of, and then all of a sudden it went into the negative, right? And now that negative is averaging negative 12.4%. And when it comes down to what has been covered, especially by also the right wing, what has been pushed on to Joe Biden, you have seen Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, other Republicans in the United States Senate coming out and saying that COVID-19 is going up because Joe Biden is allowing people to immigrate to this country and thus are bringing COVID-19 with them. Well, that is a claim that has been, not necessarily tackled on by President Biden or really tackled on by many members of the Democratic Party. It is something that clearly has resonated with voters because they are hearing it from the right wing. It's not necessarily being debunked. In addition, people just love to listen in to those they support. If Republicans don't already approve of the mask mandates, don't already approve of the vaccine for some cases, they might be inclined and are very much inclined to to listen to Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, and believe in this. And when they spread that sentiment, it gets around. And now independents and some Democrats are in agreement that Biden isn't doing a good job when it comes down to immigration. And you can see here that this is also a determining factor as to why he's in the negative. And immigration, isn't the most important issue to the American public. Coronavirus is not either. But the issue of the economy. How is the economy going? How is the stock market doing? While that may not necessarily be the sole issue, the economy in its entirety is always viewed as the most important one. When you saw the keys to the White House, as I covered it back in 2020, when they predicted that Joe Biden was going to win the presidency after predicting that Donald Trump was going to win in 2016, their sole determining factors were the economy. It's that quote. It's the economy, stupid. I mean, that is true when it comes down to job approval rating. Donald Trump was approved of in terms of handling the economy for a long period of time. That eventually went into the negative because of COVID-19. And because he was the man in the top office, he was blamed for it and consequently voted out. And you can see here that the approval rating of the economy is plus 1.8%. But for a long period of time, and I mean quite literally the entire time of his presidency, Joe Biden's approval rating with the economy was much higher. I mean, you see numbers that are very high here. Plus 22, plus 11, plus 19, a low point of plus 4. Then a month later, actually 2 weeks later, same poll comes out and says actually plus 12, plus 14, plus 9, plus 10. Much better than negative 2, plus 10. Shining star at plus 10 when that was the standard. In fact, a lower point compared to previous polls. So the approval rating of the economy has dipped down quite a bit for Joe Biden. And you can see here that with foreign policy in the way as well, he's not really approved of in any regard besides COVID-19 by a heavy amount. Which also means that once the coronavirus is no longer a prominent issue for the American public, as it was starting to not be, that would make Joe Biden, I don't know why I said Donald Trump, Joe Biden's approval rating begin to deplete. Because that will be an issue that, while highly regarded across the country as a plus for Joe Biden, won't necessarily matter to voters anymore. So here's the job approval rating according to Real Clear Politics. It's actually a bit worse for Joe Biden. According to 538, based off the numbers on your screen right now, you're looking at an approval rating of 4.3%. Actually, it might not be worse than 538. We can see here that the approval rating for Joe Biden is 4.2%, so it's narrowly worse, but pretty much tracking around the same number. I mean, you can see, if you want to see on the bottom screen, what the actual plus was for Joe Biden. I mean, for the entirety of the presidency, he hasn't been disapproved of. But this shows that eventually it will reach there, that the paths are beginning to cross. Pollsters such as Quinnipiac, which had Biden up 20 points previously, now only have him up by 3. The Economist YouGov poll only has him up by 2 when they previously would have had him up by 10, 15 points. The approval rating of Joe Biden has consistently dropped, and now it's in the minority of those who approve of Joe Biden when you add those who disapprove of him or do not have an opinion of him. Versus previously, 55% of the nation said they approved of him, and just 35.6% said they disapproved of him. A lot more room for error for Joe Biden. That is not the case today. And in terms of handling the coronavirus, 538 also tracks this. You can see here that the approval rating was once 63% throughout all of April, all of May, going into June. And then the Delta variant hit. Things started to dip. The mask mandate started to go back up. The public started to be worried about the pandemic. And that's when you started to see the public reception to Joe Biden begin to deplete. In addition, we are now starting to see the continued resurgence of the Taliban across of Afghanistan. This is a big thing that the Obama White House had to deal with. The big thing that we saw in the Middle East, that the Democratic Party in 2012 through 2016 really viewed as an extremely important issue when it came down to 2016's election, to 2014's election, the response to the war in the Middle East. And what is happening now seems to be reminiscent of what did happen under the Obama White House. And that doesn't resonate well with voters. When they start to see headlines about the Taliban and Afghanistan and about American troops being sent back to Afghanistan, people start to question, are we about to go back into war? Are we about to go back into the same position we were in 5 years ago? Donald Trump was applauded by members of the Democratic Party, and I would say rightfully so in many regards, for handling a lot of what happened in the Middle East over his presidency. But if this starts to come back, if we start to see more media reports about it, as you can now see with live updates on CNN, with constant coverage here, when they haven't really taken off the coverage from the American public for quite some time. This is the first time we are seeing a major type of conflict. I don't know why it took me so long to figure out that word, conflict, outside of this country. And now the media is flocking to it because it's coverage that they, of course, need to cover. It's worth covering, but it only shows to be negative for Joe Biden because he is the man in the highest office. If Donald Trump was the president of the United States, thousands of tweets would have already been sent out against him. The same way thousands of tweets have already been sent out against Joe Biden. And of course, the American public is very reactionary. Once they start to see this, they will respond negatively. Once they start to see the country back on track with COVID-19, they will tend to push the approval rating up, as they did for many months of the Joe Biden presidency. But with this infrastructure bill, this seems to be one of the least important things at this point in time. This infrastructure bill passed 4 days ago. It was a major win for both Democrats and Republicans. But guess what? Not many people remember it right now. In fact, the only thing we really talk about at this point is the throttling from both moderate House Democrats and progressive House Democrats. Progressives saying that they won't pass this unless Democrats pass a $3.5 trillion budget bill for a number of programs around the nation. But the moderate Democrats in the House are saying we won't pass the budget bill until the infrastructure bill passes. So now they're at a gridlock here where they just simply can't move in the right direction. And while the moderate Democrats are saying we can't wait months, we can't wait for Pelosi to try to leverage this with the United States Senate. We need the Senate to do this on their own, and we need to pass the infrastructure bill to help people around this nation. But Nancy Pelosi is saying if we move forward with the infrastructure bill, we will be allowing the United States Senate, more specifically Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, to not pass this $1 trillion budget because they don't want to, and there's no longer leverage from the House of Representatives because they know that if this was done separately, if the infrastructure bill passed and there was no type of leverage on behalf of Nancy Pelosi towards these Senate Democrats, that they could just go about their day and forget about budget reconciliation. And of course, 48 Democrats would want to go forth with it, but Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have already expressed their concern with the budget bill. And if that concern was enough, right now that concern is just a concern. But if there was no type of leverage from the Pelosi side, that concern would easily just be squashing the bill and moving on, and Democrats would have a new priority. But then unfortunately, as said by Nancy Pelosi, at least in her eyes, it would be leaving people behind while still moving forward. So what we are looking at here, let's see if we can find the New York Times COVID-19 count across the nation, because it does show where you are starting to see a resurgence in cases, and it's actually quite unfortunate to see. I mean, looking across the nation, our high point was in January of 2021. We saw a lot of COVID-19 cases across the holiday season because people were visiting their families. They were traveling amidst the pandemic. Things were getting much, much worse. And then it started to die down. We were at actually one of our lowest times of the entire pandemic during the June time period, during the entire month of June. States started lifting their mask mandates. My home state of Maryland, one of the most Democratic states in the union, lifted their mask mandates. My county, the most Democratic county in the state of Maryland, lifted the mask mandate. And now it's back because these cases are right back up to beginning of Thanksgiving numbers. These cases are not good. We have over half this country fully vaccinated, 60% with one dose of the vaccination, yet for some reason, we are having a resurgence in cases. The reason being the Delta variant. And also, just unvaccinated individuals are starting to see why they should have gotten vaccinated in the first place. And if you take a look at the number of vaccinations by day, you'll see that the numbers, while sure hit a high point recently, they aren't exactly as high as they should be. Let's see if we can find it here. During the months of March and April, when people started to flock to get the vaccine, we were looking at 3 million doses administered per day. Today, that number is just around 716,000 by daily average. Now, August 13th was the largest day in quite some time now for the number of doses administered. But beyond there, we really haven't seen a large portion of the public choosing to get vaccinated. And that's because people have become complacent, or they simply do not trust the vaccine. If you take a look at this map, it closely correlates with the 2016 election results, the only exceptions being Pennsylvania and Nevada, when it comes down to the states when you cut off the first dose vaccination at 70%. You cut it off at 70%, and then every single one of the states that has 70% more of the public single-dosed or fully vaccinated voted for Hillary Clinton, with the exception of Pennsylvania. And then under 70%, every single one of those states voted for Donald Trump, except for Nevada. Quite fascinating to see. And even some Biden states, such as Georgia, are lagging behind when it comes to the vaccination. Just 44.5% of the population covered. Even in Florida, 57.1% are covered. So what's happening here across the United States is that we are looking at pretty much just political lines defining who and where people are getting vaccinated. And in terms of COVID-19, you look at the hot spots across this nation, a lot of it in the Deep South. The Northeast seems to be doing very well with the pandemic. Some more concentrated parts of the West, some rural parts of Oregon are being hit really hard. Wyoming is being hit really hard. Missouri, Arkansas. I mean, look at Mississippi. Look at Mississippi. This is appalling to see. This is so unfortunate to see. And schools are beginning to not even allow mask mandates back. In Florida, they're not. I mean, you're looking at bid day in the University of Alabama, which will likely be a super spreader event, but it's because people want to return back to normal. And I'm not going to lie, the bid day stuff in Alabama is absolutely fascinating, right? But not at the expense of plenty of unvaccinated students getting COVID-19, spreading it across the country, and spreading it across the county in Alabama, across the state, and bringing it to a red state. Not meant to say a red state because it's Republican, but a red state because of where it looks on the New York Times map. But you look at states such as New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, none of that is happening because people are vaccinated up there. In the South, across the Bible Belt even, not vaccinated individuals, and that's the unfortunate reality. And because of that, the American public is going to see skyrocketing COVID-19 cases. Because of the unvaccinated individuals, the mask mandates are now back in place. So those who even are vaccinated are going to blame one person. They are going to blame the person who seems to be the most connected to the CDC, to Dr. Anthony Fauci, and that is Joe Biden. And that's why his approval rating has been deteriorating. COVID-19, which has been primarily affecting unvaccinated individuals, is affecting Joe Biden in a very heavy way. For a long period of time, people were happy with where they were. If they got vaccinated, they could go out in public, and if you were unvaccinated, the CDC said that it was safe enough in outdoor spaces for people to not wear masks. Well, now, everybody has to wear masks indoors, and most people aren't even listening. The people who are listening, typically speaking, are those who are vaccinated. Well, guess what? Even if they're vaccinated, they are probably upset that they have to wear a mask when they see those who aren't vaccinated not wearing masks, but the vaccinated people are wearing them at the expense of unvaccinated people. The sentiment, the angry sentiment towards the CDC, towards these unvaccinated individuals, I think, is partially founded just due to the fact that for a year now, people have played their part in this pandemic. They wore their masks, they're socially distanced, they didn't go out to parties, they didn't hold mass events, while unvaccinated individuals did. And they are living their lives as if nothing is happening right now, not listening to the CDC warnings, and thus this reinforcing cycle where things are getting worse, so vaccinated individuals are being punished at the fault of it. So all around, only one person seems to be to blame, and that is Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been consistently trying to inform the American public that this is the pandemic of the unvaccinated, because it's true. He wants to encourage people to get vaccinated, and it's also hurting his approval rating. And I understand why he's upset about this, and you can understand also why vaccinated individuals are upset about the repeating mask mandates, about the changing CDC guidelines, what is right versus what is not right. The mask mandate a month ago was so different than what it is today. And while it is largely because people won't get vaccinated and people are being unsafe during this pandemic, people are going to look for someone to blame. And that is President Joe Biden, just as it was President Donald Trump during the 2020 election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.